Okay, thank you. Welcome to planning meeting number 219 of the Planning Committee. This meeting is broadcast on the internet and the recording of this meeting will be published on the city's website. And obviously, given the COVID circumstances, we can only have limited numbers here with us in the gallery, but it's great to see people in face-to-face again. And we can still share these meetings via the live stream. Council would like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and pay our respects to elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are part of the Geelong community today. I'd like to introduce to you the panel that we have here tonight. I've got Councillor Belinda Maloney, Councillor Sarah Mansfield, Councillor Trent Sullivan, I'm Councillor Kylie Grisbeck, Councillor Jim Mason and Councillor Ron Nelson with us here. I'd like to introduce you to the officers for tonight's report is Amelia Green, who's the Principal Planner, Tim Webb, who's the Acting Coordinator of Statutory Planning, and I've got Joanne Van Slageren, the Manager of City Development. The procedure for tonight will be that the officer will present a brief summary of the written report to the committee. The objectors will then have an opportunity to speak to their objection, and we will ask that you speak for approximately 3 minutes. The time will be approximately 3 minutes long, and after which time I'll probably have a little signal on my desk to tell me that the 3 minutes are up. The applicant will then speak to their application, and we will ask the applicant to speak for no longer sort of 5 to 10 minutes, at which time I'll try and get an alarm going for that one as well. And then the panel may ask questions of the officers, of the objectors or the applicants during that course. At the end of the presentation, the panel will discuss the application and make a decision. The applicants and objectors will refer their comments to the panel and not to other parties in the room. And the panels are not sort of a question and answer forums, they're more a chance for the parties to explain their positions and their views on this matter. The decision of this committee is the final decision of council under acted delegated authority. If anyone is aggrieved by the decision of tonight's committee, they may appeal to the VCAT, which is the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, and our staff can help you with that process. I need a confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting, dated the 1st of July. Sarah Mansfield moved, Councillor Sarah Mansfield moved, Councillor Deputy Mayor Trent Sullivan to second. Any of those declarations of conflict of interest tonight? No, thank you. Matters for consideration tonight is PP 12482020, 120 Barron Terrace, South Geelong. If I could pass to Amelia for your report. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. The proposal that we're looking at is for an electronic major promotion sign that is attached to a pylon, which is a large wide pole on which it sits.
Sorry, Amelia, can you just bring the microphone a little bit closer to you? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. The site is located within an industrial zone that sits adjacent to land zoned in the general residential Schedule 1. The zoning of the land gives the impression that the sign will interact with or perhaps reflect an industrially developed landscape with buildings and signage. However, the site is actually located at the rear of an industrial area, and its interaction will be with the Breakwater Bridge and the dwellings and residential neighbourhood in which it faces. The sign will not interact in any way with the industrial zoning in which the pylon sign sits. The overlays that affect the site include the land subject to inundation overlay, which relates to flooding, and that's due to the site being located adjacent to the Barwon River environs. It's also affected partly by a public acquisition overlay, and this relates to land that was acquired for the construction of the bridge in the past, and it's also affected by the Design and Development Overlay Schedule 20, and this is a standard overlay that applies in industrial areas to encourage modern building design and landscaping. So the sign structure will stand at an overall height of just under 20 metres. The sign itself is significant in size, measuring 12.5 metres in width and 4 metres in height, with a total area of each sign of just over 50 square metres. The sign will be highly visible from the dwellings in the area, and with the closest dwelling being located just outside of 40 metres from the sign. So I'll take you to page 9 of the agenda and to figure 4, which is the top picture in the report. And it gives you an idea of the size of the sign in relation to the Breakwater Bridge. I'll then take you to the following page, to figure 6, which has, it's taken from the applicant's information that they've submitted, and it's showing where the sign is located, the distance of just under 40 metres to the nearest residential property boundary, and it also shows that that sign sort of faces directly towards that dwelling. Signage is proposed to be illuminated with animated images as if it were a double large television screen. These images are proposed to be active on both sides of the sign from 6 a.m. in the morning until 11 p.m. every single day. So bedtime during the week and Sunday nights for families is certain to be earlier than 11 p.m. This is not a neighbourhood located in downtown Geelong where you might expect bright lights and signage till late at night. This is a residential neighbourhood that's set next to the Barwon River. Yes, it does sit next to the Breakwater Bridge, but this is not a freeway, and the bridge isn't busy all through the night. When you look at the site in context to its surrounds, the only other lighting in the area are street lights in the centre of the bridge and the traffic lights at the intersection. There are no other bright lights in the immediate area, no other commercial or industrial buildings which have bright illuminated signage, bustling streets. When looking from the dwellings in the neighbourhood, the once clear open views across the skyline of Geelong and those down to the Barwon River environs will be interrupted by a two-sided 50 square metre illuminated animated sign, a sign that's not considered to relate to its surrounds but will stand alone. I'd like to now take you to the policy within the planning scheme, which specifically relates to signage that we assess signage applications against, which is clause 5205. So the first decision guideline that we need to consider is the character of the area, including the sensitivity of the area in terms of the natural environment, waterways and open space, and residential character. So the sign sits within the river environs at its base, and the immediate area includes waterways and open space to the southwest. The compatibility of the sign with the existing or desired future character of the area in which it's proposed to be located is the next decision guideline to be considered. So the site has little to no relationship with the industrial zone in which it's located, with the closest dwellings and buildings by far being dwellings to the east of the site rather than industrial buildings. So the desired future character of this area is not for large commercial buildings or arrays of business ID signage. So the council has approved the preparation of a draft environment strategy action plan dated 2020 to 22, which includes the potential revegetation of land directly to the west of the subject site. And it's considered the proposed sign would disrupt the views of the Barwon River and its environs in relation to that draft environmental strategy action plan. The next decision guideline at the beginning of 5205 is the consistency with any identifiable outdoor advertising theme in the area. It's considered the sign will be nothing but inconsistent with the outdoor advertising theme in the area, simply because there isn't a theme. It's a residential neighbourhood. Major promotion signs are discouraged within open space reserves or corridors and around waterways, and perhaps most importantly, major promotion signs are discouraged where they will form a dominant visual element from residential areas. So therefore, the proposal is recommended to be refused on the grounds that the signage will have a detrimental impact to and be incompatible with the amenity of the residential neighbourhood and Barwon River environs. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. Thank you. Councillors, any questions of Amelia at this point after her report? At this stage? Okay. I have two people listed that wish to speak in objection to. My first on my list here is Eva. Are you here? Yep. Would you like to come to the front there? And just, you can take your mask off to speak into the microphone if you wish. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I was really hoping that I'd get out of speaking altogether and that other people would go first and say all the same things that I intended to say. But my name is Eva Vanderlees. I've already put in my objection, obviously, to the facts as they're represented. But one thing that I think I failed to get across in my objection is that I don't recognise our home as described in the planning application. There's lots of talk of how things relate to freeways and particular elements of why it's appropriate for this particular area, but our neighbourhood is not actually described. I couldn't identify with any of it. The way that breakwater appears, and I'm talking about breakwater because it is the area that the sign will be facing and affecting. But the way they appear on a map and the way they appear in local newspapers are not representative of the neighbourhood whatsoever. Lots of people are really unaware of breakwater and who we are and why we choose to live there, because really we only hear about traffic accidents on the bridge and the intersection, industrial area developments and bikie raids, which really don't affect us. Breakwater is this really lovely, quiet little neighbourhood. We moved there because of the beautiful vista over the back fence. We live on Tucker Street, which faces over the sign. When we moved to, my husband moved in before I did, and I joined him afterwards. But the appeal of the place was it was really quiet, and obviously the Breakwater Bridge and the Norris development have affected that, but we had this beautiful view and we were assured really that it wasn't going to change because it's a former landfill site, and so there are very limited things that you can do with it. And we've been aware of the council's plan to refurbish it, and that's the wrong word, re-landscape it and bring it back to what it once was, and probably even better. So we sort of decided to hang in there, but it didn't end up being the reason we stayed. We stayed because of the community. I think probably the best way to describe our community is we don't live in each other's pockets, but we're all there for each other. I've never had an occasion come up where I haven't had help within seconds when I've needed it. A few years ago, our power line was ripped out. Actually, our power line was ripped out a couple of times, but the most recent time, 2 years ago, we found out about it because our neighbour called us and let us know. And in the meantime, we were able to call our landlord, who also happens to be a Breakwater resident, who was on site before we were, had SES on site, had called contractors and had everything sorted out. They offered to put our fridge, like the contents of our fridge, in their own fridge so that we wouldn't have our food spoilt over the 5 days that it took to repair. We had people contacting us, offering us showers and ovens and whatever we needed, PowerPoint, so we could charge devices. We had the most incredible network of people. And COVID just amplified that incredibly. We had people who, one person who was meant to be here tonight has not been able to attend because they're awaiting a COVID test. So we dropped off food supplies for them this afternoon to make sure that they had enough to keep them going. And
mind if I just ask you to make a final statement because we've hit our time? That's fine, no problem.
But essentially, our house backs onto this. Our entire family and living area is facing where the sign is proposed to go, and our children's bedroom faces this sign. I don't see how, if it were to go ahead, we could consider remaining. I've got no idea what my kids would be exposed to through the advertising and just the relentlessness of that kind of infringement on our personal enjoyment of our house would be beyond what we could cope with. And I don't want to lose my community. This is the best community I've ever lived in, and I've lived all over Victoria in lots of different demographics and coastal and country and regional locations. I've lived in the city. By far and above, Breakwater is my most favourite place that I've ever lived in, and I do not want to have to leave on the basis of this monstrosity.
Thank you. Should probably get you in a tourism ad for Breakwater. But thank you very much for your submission. I appreciate it. Councillors, just wait 2 seconds, just in case any councillors have got any questions for you. Councillors, any questions at this point? Eva? No, okay, you're off the hook. Thank you very much, Eva. I've only got, I haven't got any other objectors here. Are there any other objectors in the room that wish to use their time? Yes, please come to the front. Yep. Thank you. And just, if you just give us your name, please.
My name is Michael Barrett, and I live at 1 Keith Court in Breakwater. And as Amelia pointed out, if the nearest residence is 40 metres away, then as the crow flies, I'm about 150 metres away. And from my backyard, I'll be able to see it. Could I just ask Amelia one question? You said it was going to be 20 metres high. How high above the bridge is that going to be?
You can probably ask that in a sec. I can ask it for you. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. I wonder, is it going to impact on train drivers? Because they have to visualise signals. This thing is going to be right near where the train travels, and with its lumens and everything like that, with its bright lights, will it impact on trains? Also, in the correspondence that I got a few months ago, which I don't have with me now, it stated that some study said that the lumens are of an acceptable level. But then, in the next sentence, they say, in order to allow the people of the neighbourhood to get their regular sleep, we'll turn the thing off. So if the lumens are of an acceptable level, why turn it off at all? Then they say we're going to turn it off from 11 o'clock till 6 o'clock. Well, for normal sleeping patterns, I thought it was 8 hours, not 7. Now, the other thing, I work for Macquarie's. I use that bridge 3, 4, 5 times a day. Heading west at 5 o'clock at night, the traffic is banked back to the Buckley's roundabout. And at 5 o'clock at night, just prior to Tucker Street, from Tanner Street to Tucker Street, it opens up to 2 lanes. It is saturated with traffic. The lights turn green, 2 lanes of traffic head west, then very soon after, the 2 lanes sag back to 1. Exactly where this thing is going to be. Can you imagine 12 metres by 4 metres, a scantily clad buxom beauty advertising alley cats, and all the boys are driving over the bridge going, look at that. Bang, there'll be collisions. It's bad enough as it is right now. At that time of night, you have to be on your guard. You do not need any distractions whatsoever in order to make the merge safe. That thing up there is going to create problems. 100%, I have no doubts about it. Now, just to finish off, I don't mind an applicant thinking about private enterprise and trying to make some money. That's fine, that's what it's all about. How about you consider, if you do decide to go ahead with this, that this thing just faces west, that it doesn't face east. We don't want this great big spotlight thing in our backyards, but if it faces that way, no one sees it. Not one house is on that side of the bridge, not one. And then they can, and it's right there, it's safe where 1 lane turns into 2 lanes. It actually turns into 4 because there's a right lane and a left lane. And then they can look at it all they like, as long as it's heading that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Councillors, did you have any questions of Michael whilst he was with us? No? Okay. All right, thank you. At this point, I'd like to invite the applicant. Stephen, are you speaking on behalf of the applicant? Okay, feel free to come forward. Thank you.
Good evening, all.
Evening. Welcome.
Thank you. We certainly acknowledge that signs such as this require a balance between arguments for and arguments against. And that is always a difficult question as to achieving the appropriate balance. What we've attempted to do here is to achieve that balance. The first thing I'd like to point out is that we have achieved a no objection from Department of Transport on a safety point of view. They have included in their conditions a 10-point safety plan, which we are confident that we can meet, and in any event, if we couldn't meet it, the sign doesn't proceed. The other point is all other external referral authorities, including the catchment authorities in relation to land subject to inundation, have raised no objections. So that essentially leaves us with what we considered to be the primary concern, was the residential properties. So what we did is we provided an illumination report which indicated compliance with the full compliance with all the requirements, wasn't going to cause adverse amenity to those adjoining residents that are 40 metres away and are only facing one side of the sign. Only 2 properties are on a direct angle, if you like. All the other properties will have an obscure view of the sign. The sign sits above eye height for the residents, so they're looking through it, not at it. But what we decided then, because we had a residential abuttal and because we had a responsibility, be it an industrial land, be it in an area where there are no significant vistas identified by the planning scheme, the offer was, we'll turn it off. Now, we didn't make that offer because we thought our illuminated plan, our daylighting assessment was flawed. We offered to turn it off because we thought it achieved the balance between a sign in an industrial land and a residential zone some 40 metres away, given that we had resolved to the Department of Transport's satisfaction the safety factors relating to traffic using the road. So it was a deliberate technique to achieve the balance in terms of signs. And yes, signs are there to display. That's what the purpose of the sign is. But at the same time, we recognise that we had a responsibility to ensure a satisfactory interface with the residents, be it that they were 40 metres away. So we say in relation to other matters such as the walking tracks, they'll be obscured from the bridge structure itself. The question of clutter, we say that we have resolved that by the blade configuration of the sign in terms of the orientation of the area. It's limiting to one side to the west, one side to the east. And of course, there's only one sign. So the question of clutter doesn't arise in this instance. Doesn't set a precedent, because if any other signage was to follow, it would have to be on other land, and then the considerations that have been applied to the planning scheme in terms of clutter would then become at the forefront of any consideration that council would have to make. So, in summary, we understand that we are putting in a sign that's not there. We have attempted to resolve the interface issues by demonstrating an acceptable level of illumination, putting it in a position that it's out of direct eye view, if you like, at ground level, limiting the exposure to effectively 2 dwellings, which you'll see from the plans, and turning it off at 11 o'clock at night, and it comes on at 6 o'clock in the morning as a way of achieving that required balance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got a few questions, and I'm sure councillors will have questions for you. Who owns the land?
My client.
Your client owns the land directly.
Yes.
That industrial piece of land.
Correct.
Okay. And so access to the sign would be from that industrial land, not from the court that would go down.
It's if I recall, it's 10 or 15 lots, and there's an access road. There's access from South Bowen Terrace to the northwest, and it will be accessed by there. So maintenance will not be an issue.
Thank you. Councillors, questions from you at this point? I might ask the question whilst you're here. I might ask the questions of the officers. In terms of the height, what was the height above the bridge that would be? I can't remember. I can't recall. I'm trying to find it through the document.
It's on page 9, but it's a bit hard to read, so Tim zoomed in for me. So it's just under 6 metres in height above the bridge.
Above the bridge, okay. Thank you. Councillors? Councillor Maloney.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I've got a question about whether or not you have, or your client has been in touch with the Wathaurong people who have culturally significant relics and artefacts found in that area, and it's deemed to be a culturally significant part of this region.
Look, I'd have to seek instructions in relation to that, Councillor. Can I do it now? Do you think that's... No, there hasn't been. There hasn't been any requirement to do so. The land of which the structure sits on has been effectively disturbed through just various actions, the development of the site for industrial purposes, so we're not aware of it containing or being alerted to any artefacts that would impact upon our ability to put the structure on the site.
Thank you. There is a comment by the officers in the report on that one, I think, as well. Yeah. Any other councillors? No? Councillor Nelson, would you like to just speak into your microphone?
A question of officers. It says there's 30 objections, but I can only see 3, and I can't see who they're by. It doesn't say. It usually says the objector's name and or their address as well on there, and I can't see who's objecting to what, and it's all just seems like a big mash of...
Yep.
Is that what's happened?
Yeah.
Don't actually, within statutory planning reports, put names and addresses. That's usually in strategic amendments that gets provided as an attachment at the back of the council report. But we just do summaries. There is a map that shows the dots.
I see that.
Yeah, but we don't put names and addresses. No, but you would have received, not in the report, but you would have received a list previously.
And the 30 objections? There's only 3 in here.
They summarised, Amelia, the objections?
Yes, the 30 objections are summarised.
3
Mashed
types
into
of...
3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I sort of tried to summarise them in themes of what the
I'm just trying
objections
to
were
work
about.
out who's objected to what and where they live in relation to why they're objecting, because someone said that the lights on the Breakwater Bridge go in their backyard, and I don't know who that is. So it just seems a bit messy.
We normally do it with statutory planning reports that we just summarise. We don't indicate individual properties.
There is a map, Councillor Nelson, that shows the dots on where
I see that.
and
I
you
see
can
that.
see the residents right along that pit. Yeah. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Mason?
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. How did you arrive at the 11 till 7, is it? 11 till 6 time frame?
Until 6. That was arrived at through discussions with our independent consultant in relation to the illumination report. And so it was a discussion about what constitutes normal sleeping hours. And so the balance was, well, 11 till 6 seemed to be what was generally accepted by the industry. Of course, it doesn't take into account shift work. Yes, we acknowledge that, but it was that general, well, this is the general sleep pattern in relation to that, and an acknowledgement that earlier, say when children go to sleep, then if there's bedrooms facing, given that we're 40 metres away, the anticipation would be that there would be drapes used and blinds used, etc., and the windows would be screened from the illumination. And also, it seemed to fit with the level of compliance achieved in relation to the Australian standards relating to the illumination, which was achieved and ticked all the way through on all the various requirements. So it seemed like a good compromise standard to achieve.
I have to ask the question, since one of the objectors mentioned, how about it only facing in one direction? I suppose you rationalise that in terms of cost benefit. Did you explore that possibility?
My understanding is no, that wasn't discussed. I haven't got any instructions in relation to that, Councillor. That it was a package, if you like, and there was the illumination report, and the offer was in recognition that there was the sign blade facing east, facing the residential area, and that's how best to achieve the balance between the net community benefit requirement and the requirement for advertising expressed in the planning scheme. That's principally why it's there, because we had an east-facing sign facing the residential area, the backs of the residential areas some 40 metres away, but only 2 of them. So we thought it was a reasonable compromise.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. Thank you for your presentation. I'm guessing you've read the officer's report and findings, and you would have noted that they've found that there are issues with a range of different planning requirements at the City of Greater Geelong, including zoning, various schedules, overlays, land use compatibility, etc. I appreciate you presented that you've made some adjustments to address that, but what accommodations have you made to, or what attempts did you make to address some of those concerns? And the second part to the question is, I know that 30 objections were received, that you were made aware of the nature of these objections. Again, what accommodations were made to address some of those concerns that were raised by residents?
Oh, the accommodation, I don't necessarily agree with the emphasis put on a number of the policies, and why I say that was that one of the particular concerns raised, if I could just deal with those questions, Councillor, in terms of the order of my recollection, was the question of safety. So what we did is we ensured that we complied with and understood what Department of Transport was going to say in terms of their 10-point plan. So when we received that advice, we looked at that 10-point plan and were satisfied that we can meet that requirement. The concerns in relation to the interface and the policy, the direct response to that was to test whether or not we had an issue, test whether or not the illumination met the Australian standards, and then because we understood the level of concerns expressed by the residents, then the turning off the sign was that next step we took to achieve and satisfy the objective or the policy of where you have an industrial zone that abuts a residential zone. That brings a greater level of responsibility in terms of the application you put in and how you propose to deal with the sign. So from the very outset, we understood our challenges in relation to this site, and while we didn't adjust it through the planning process, we adjusted it before we lodged it. So we made sure that the blade to the east, our most sensitive abuttal, was limited in extent and only orientated to, say, 2 residential properties. And then the angle of the blade was then obscure enough to provide residents further away, travelling north, with less of a view. We were confident with the illumination strategy and the report done by the independent consultant, and then coupled with that was we'll turn it off. So while we didn't change it during it, other than discuss and try and understand Council's concerns, we tried to get it right from the word go.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Any other further questions? Thank you for your presentation. We'll now deliberate on that. Councillors, do I have anybody that wants to move a recommendation? Councillor Mansfield?
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. I'm happy to move the recommendation that officers have put forward.
And a seconder, Councillor Maloney. Thank you. Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who's come in this evening and presented. Thank you to our officers for your detailed report and guidance on this issue. I think our role as councillors is to implement our planning policies and in making these decisions, while also taking into account our role as representatives of the community. And I think in this instance we have a strong recommendation from our officers. There are a range of planning concerns with this particular proposal that haven't been adequately, I think, addressed throughout that planning process.
and particularly the impact on amenity flows through a range of the different planning clauses, overlays, etc. That's a very strong theme. It's also a very strong theme from residents that we've heard a bit of tonight, but also in the summarised a summary of the objections that were received, as well as correspondence that we've received in the lead up to this meeting. I'm reasonably familiar with the area and understand that the visual impact of this proposal will be quite significant for those residents, particularly close to this. So I think based on both the planning advice we've been given and the strong community sentiment from the local residents, I'm very comfortable with the officer's report.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Maloney?
Councillor Griesbeck, in keeping with the aesthetics of the area, which is quite culturally significant, but also very close to what I would call a black spot as far as traffic is concerned, there is limited visibility in that particular intersection, which I've had a number of near misses at personally, and I think that adding another distraction to already potentially frustrated drivers at peak hour is a potential for disaster. So I think that in keeping with the aesthetics of the area, plus also the community sentiment that was expressed earlier on, I think I'd like to commend the officers for their recommendations tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney. Unfortunately, there's no more time for questions or answers. This is time for deliberation for council, so I won't be taking any further questions. Councillors, any other comments on this motion that has been moved? I would just like to make a comment that I think what we're seeing here is that the signage is considered detrimental impact to the amenity of the houses that are there, and we hear often people are passionate about where they live and they're passionate about their views and skylines and rivers that run through there. So in this case, I'm taking the officer's recommendation and I'll be supporting the moved recommendation before us. So, councillors, if there's nothing further, we'll take a... Councillor Nelson?
I'm just trying to find my notes. Councillor Griesbeck. I asked a question about who the objectors were because I'm just trying to work out whose specific objections relate to what. When the CCMA thinks it's okay, VicTrack thinks it's okay, Council's own engineering services think it's okay, so I'm not sure why, from a traffic perspective, councils would say that it's a problem because VicTrack have already said it, not VicTrack, VicRoads have already said, Department of Transport have already said it's okay. It's not near the intersection, it's back from the intersection, quite a way back. It just seems that people are concerned that it's in their neighbourhood and that's why they're upset. But I'm reading some of the objectors and they're saying that the blinding lights from GMHBA Stadium also upset them. So I'm not sure who said that because I can't figure it out. But it's in an industrial area, so I don't see a real issue with it. Maybe face one way. Maybe that's probably the better way to do it. But I'm certainly supportive of it. But
okay, thank you, Councillor Mason.
I think we'll see. I'm in the minority.
Thank you. Councillor Mason or Councillor Sullivan wish to make comment?
I'll just add one thing that it's disappointing to hear that only 2 houses will be affected. We heard those sentiments expressed tonight by at least one of those house owners tonight. I recognise that a lot of actions have been taken to mitigate the effect, but overall I still think that the character and sensitivity of the area is overwhelmingly against having a sign in that position.
Thank you. If there's no further comments, I'll put this recommendation to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendation? Those against? Thank you, that is carried. Thank you for coming this evening and have a good rest of the night. Thank you.